What if the chains holding you down weren't made of iron, but of your own emotions? What if your fear, your sense of obligation, and your guilt were being used against you, turned into weapons that quietly controlled your life? This isn't just manipulation, it's emotional blackmail. And it's one of the darkest, most effective psychological tactics ever used. Emotional blackmail doesn't leave bruises. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. Instead, it whispers in your ear, wrapping itself around your heart until you believe that the only way to survive, the only way to keep love, approval, or security, is to surrender. The formula is simple. If you don't do what I want, you'll suffer the consequences. But the consequences don't have to be physical. They can be emotional, and that makes them even more devastating. Have you ever been told, "If you really loved me, you would"? Have you ever heard, "After everything I've done for you, how could you say no"? Have you ever felt forced into a choice, not because you wanted to, but because you were terrified of the guilt or rejection that would come if you refused? That's not love. That's not respect. That's blackmail. In relationships, emotional blackmail is everywhere. A partner might threaten to hurt themselves if you leave. They might remind you of every sacrifice they've made, demanding obedience as repayment. They might say, "If you walk away, you'll never find someone like me again." At first, it sounds like desperation, but underneath, it's control. One survivor described it this way. "He told me that if I ever left, he would end his life. I stayed for years, terrified that my leaving would kill him. But what I didn't realize was that staying was killing me." Have you ever stayed in a relationship, not because you loved the person, but because you were afraid of what would happen if you didn't? That's emotional blackmail tightening its grip. Parents use emotional blackmail too. "We sacrificed everything for you. You owe us. If you don't do what we ask, you're ungrateful." Or worse, silence and disappointment so heavy that it crushes you more than words ever could. Children raised under this weight learn early that love is conditional. They learn that approval must be earned by obedience. And those lessons follow them into adulthood. Have you ever felt like you owed your parents a debt you could never repay? That no matter what you did, it would never be enough? That's emotional blackmail disguised as family duty. In the workplace, the blackmail continues. Bosses say, "If you cared about this company, you'd stay late." Coworkers say, "We're all sacrificing. Why can't you?" And suddenly, you're working nights and weekends, not because you want to, but because guilt and fear demand it. You fear losing opportunities. You fear being labeled disloyal. You feel obligated to give more, even when there's nothing left to give. One employee said, "My boss told me, if you leave early, don't expect to grow here." I felt trapped. Every time I thought about leaving on time, I heard his voice in my head. I wasn't working for my career anymore. I was working to avoid his punishment. That's emotional blackmail hidden behind professionalism. Have you ever sacrificed your health, your time, your happiness at work, not because it was required, but because you feared the guilt of letting others down? That's not dedication. That's coercion. So why does emotional blackmail work so well? Because it attacks three of the deepest human fears: fear of loss, fear of rejection, and fear of being seen as bad. The manipulator plants fear. "If you don't do this, you'll lose me." They pile on obligation. "After everything I've done for you, you owe me." And then they twist the knife with guilt. "If you don't do it, you're selfish. You're ungrateful. You're cruel." Fear, obligation, guilt. The cycle is complete. And once you're in it, breaking free feels impossible. Have you ever felt like every decision you made was judged by someone else's disappointment? That even when you tried your best, it was never enough? That's emotional blackmail reshaping your reality. Psychologists explain that emotional blackmail is effective because it hijacks our survival instincts. Humans are social creatures. We're wired to seek connection, to avoid rejection. Emotional blackmail weaponizes that wiring. It convinces you that saying no means abandonment, shame, or punishment. And so, against your better judgment, you say yes. But every yes you give out of fear weakens you. Every boundary you break under obligation diminishes you. Every false guilt you carry enslaves you. Until one day, you realize you're no longer living your life, you're living theirs. The long-term damage of emotional blackmail is devastating. Victims describe constant anxiety, depression, exhaustion. They feel trapped in cycles of self-blame, believing they're never enough. Their confidence collapses, their identity erodes, and eventually, they don't even need the manipulator anymore. They become their own jailer. One survivor said, "Even after I left, I still heard his voice in my head. You're selfish. You're ungrateful." I realized I was still obeying him, even though he wasn't there. That's the ultimate victory of emotional blackmail. When you punish yourself long after the manipulator is gone. Have you ever caught yourself apologizing for something that wasn't wrong? That's not conscience. That's conditioning. So how do you break free from emotional blackmail? The first step is recognition. Call it what it is. If someone constantly threatens, guilts, or pressures you into obedience, that's not love, family, or leadership. That's blackmail. The second step is boundaries. Say no and mean it. If someone says, "If you loved me, you would," respond with, "Love isn't manipulation." If a boss says, "If you cared, you'd stay," respond with, "I care, but I won't be controlled." Boundaries turn guilt into noise instead of chains. The third step is reclaiming ownership of your emotions. Your fear, your obligation, your guilt. They are yours, not theirs. You get to decide what deserves your guilt. You get to decide what obligations are real. You get to decide what fears are valid. And finally, distance. Some people will never stop blackmailing you. The only solution is to walk away. Leaving isn't betrayal, it's freedom. Have you ever wondered how many of your choices were truly yours, and how many were made under the weight of fear, obligation, and guilt? That's the terrifying question emotional blackmail forces us to face. Because if your emotions can be turned into weapons, how much of your life is really yours? The truth is this: emotional blackmail thrives in silence. But once you name it, once you refuse to carry guilt that isn't yours, once you reject obligations that are chains, the blackmail loses its power. So here's the haunting question. If your emotions can be used to control you, who really owns your life? You or the person pulling the strings? Subscribe to Mind Control Z for more revelations on dark psychology, manipulation, and the hidden tactics used to control your mind. Because only awareness can set you free.